Well, welcome once again. This is the Doctor of Digital from the Doctor of Digital podcast. The purpose of the show is to transform your business and life with education and inspiration. I introduce busy business leaders to trends in business, technology, and marketing to highlight people you should know. Did you know that geriatric care managers who specialize in helping families with aging loved ones often have backgrounds in social work, nursing, or even financial planning? This unique blend of skills allows them to address the multifaceted challenges families face during this transition. From navigating complex medical decisions to securing financial aid and finding appropriate housing, geriatric care managers offer a holistic approach to supporting families through the aging process. Many geriatric care managers see their role as more than just providing practical support. They are on a mission to change the conversation about aging itself. In a society that often pushes the realities of later life aside, these professionals strive to paint a more positive picture. Their work isn't just about managing challenges, it's about highlighting the potential and beauty of aging. They believe everyone should embrace the possibilities of this stage of life, and their success stories serve not just as individual triumphs, but as a call to action for all of us to confront negative stereotypes and celebrate the richness of every life phase. During this episode, we'll do a deep dive into the changes and hot topics in elder care and celebrating the advantages of aging, its beauty, and its potential for growth and enjoyment. We will leverage the expertise of my guest and how to navigate the unique dynamics of the field. By the end of this episode, you'll be better equipped to know what to do, and I encourage you to contact my guest, Corinne Auman, who is an author, educator, family caregiving, and aging expert. With that, welcome to the program, and thanks for taking some time out to chat today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Glad to be here.
Wow, that's great that you could take some time. And I'm really curious, like, how did you get into a field such as this in the first place? That's kind of an interesting thing that people often want to know.
Well, most people who work in the aging field, I have found, got into it because of experiences with their own aging loved ones. And
Okay.
that is the case for me as well. I grew up next to my grandparents. We lived right next door. And through that experience and watching my mom and her sister try to navigate caring for their aging mom,
Okay.
that showed me that there was a great need for
Mm,
people in the world who could help families when they reach that moment of needing assistance to be there to say, here's what's out there, here's what's available to you, here's how much it costs, to help them navigate those resources, because most of us don't tend to think about that until that moment comes. We kind
sure.
of live in a world where we go, I'll think about that when I have to, and then when we have to, we go, oh, I don't know anything about this.
Sure. And curious, like, what kind of preparation did you have? Because since this was almost like a life situation that you found yourself in, how did you get the training and how did you get yourself prepared to be in the field?
So, all of that happened with my family when I was in high school and college. So, that was very early on. I went on to college and graduate school and studied older adulthood in graduate school,
Oh,
specifically developmental psychology with a specialty in adulthood and aging. And then um, I went on to become a college professor for a number of years, and then finally said to my husband back in 2012, this has only gotten more complicated.
yeah.
I've been thinking about doing this for years. If I'm ever going to start that business, it's time to do it. And
Got
so
it.
I did and got into it from there.
What would you say now? This has been a bit of time that's gone by. What would you say are some of the changes that you have seen and experienced over this period of time?
So it really has only become more complex for
Mm,
people trying to navigate healthcare in general. That's true for any age group. But
sure.
I think it's even more complicated when you are trying to help an older adult navigate healthcare because you don't know what's available to them. Medicare is not free and doesn't pay for everything. And a lot of people are really surprised by that. They think, oh, that's just going to pay for every healthcare need they have. And there's so many different services out there. There's assisted living, skilled nursing, memory care, independent living, continuing care, retirement communities, home care, home health. I mean, there's adult day centers. There's a million different services out there, and people just don't know what those things are, or what those services actually do, or how much they cost. And they have to, or they need guidance figuring that kind of stuff out. That
And
that complicated system has just
sure.
gotten more complicated as things have gone on.
Yeah, there's layers upon layers of complexity there, and that's one of the things I notice about really thinking of a person's background. They have to know financing, they have to know nursing, they have to know a number of fields, actually. So, are there things that you would say are some topics that people should be aware of? And as you say, I think a lot of people are in that situation. They think Medicare is going to be taken care of, everything's going to be smooth. So, what sort of topics should people be aware of, and what's been happening recently in the field?
So I think it's always important for individuals to make themselves aware of what it's going to cost to pay for care as they get older. I think we think about retirement and we think about saving financially for our vacations or paying for where we're going to live, but we don't necessarily take into account the rising healthcare costs that we're going to experience,
Okay.
and the fact that Medicare doesn't pay for everything. So those expenses catch a lot of people off guard. And I think keeping that in mind is essential. Now, having said that, it's also really important as you think about getting to retirement years that you're thinking about your social well-being and your emotional well-being, because
Hmm.
retirement is not all just about finances. There are these other aspects that you have to plan for as well.
And one of the interesting things about your background is saying about celebrating this particular period and time of life. So, could you give us some idea of that? And again, I might even say this might tie into a book you've written about this subject. So, I'm curious, why would you look at the aging process, which some people have negative feelings about? Why is this so positive? Why is this such a good time of life?
So this is one of the questions I get most often. Um, when I got into this field, I thought I was going to be working with 40-year-olds helping to care for 70-year-old parents.
Right.
And what I have been thrilled to discover is that I am actually working with 70-year-olds caring for 90-year-old parents.
Wow.
And so that has really taught me that our ideas, we think about, oh, you retire at 65, or you're an older adult at 65, or that's really older adulthood. I'm putting that in quotes.
Hmm.
Um, but the the older adulthood that we kind of stereotypically think about, that actually has gotten pushed forward a few, or later a few decades. So
Hmm.
that kind of health, needing to think about health issues, those things really now are more for the, what we might call the oldest old, 80 or 85 plus. The older adults who are 55, 65, 75 are out there still doing amazing things in a lot of cases. And we think about, if they've started a new business, they're running a nonprofit, they're volunteering, they're caregiving, they're doing all kinds of things. And we think about those individuals as anomalies, like they're some sort of super senior or they're unusual. And my book is really about the fact that that is the new normal, that it is much more common to have people in those age groups still working, still contributing, still being productive, still wanting to engage in a lot of different ways. Um, but yet our stereotypes tell us, oh no, they're older adults. It's time for them to just go play golf or watch TV all day. And that is not what is happening. So what I realized was that if I have this background, I have all this training with older adults, and if I had those stereotypes about who these older adults were going to be and I was wrong, a lot of other people are thinking about this incorrectly as well. And so it's really quite a hopeful thing. It's really been inspiring to me because I'm like, oh, life doesn't end at 65 or 70. You have several more decades now to do what you want with your life before we can think about what we stereotypically mean with older adulthood when we think about healthcare being a big issue. Maybe we don't have mobility that we used to, things like that. And that is a true thing that does happen as we get older. Our health is going to change, but many people are doing amazing things despite that. They don't let that stop them in any significant way.
And understood, and it does make a whole lot of sense, especially when people see if you're watching on video, my gray beard, they ask me a silly question like, "Are you retired?" So, I mean, I get that. I understand that from a personal point of view because
Yeah.
I'm getting to that age, right? So, I've realized that, and I also agree with seeing the people that you're describing because there are people that are in their 70s, 80s, and 90s that are still doing those incredible things, and they found that this is really a very rewarding time of life. And I said one of the advantages of getting older is that people often give you a little bit more respect too because you're older. And I said, yeah, I can kind of fake it now because I look like I know what I'm talking about because I'm older. And I think that may be true for a lot of older people because they have a wealth of experience and a lot of things that they bring to the table. One of the interesting things you said about not being prepared, I'm curious if you could talk about some of the things that people should be aware of or they should be thinking of in terms of what you advise them to do and what sort of things that you would say, what are people not aware of that they really should be thinking about?
So, one of the biggest things I mentioned a little bit earlier is that retirement, or those retirement years that we typically think of,
Hmm.
are much more than just leisure. Leisure is fun because it ends. Travel is fun because it's limited, right? When you have unlimited leisure, people start to struggle. So it's very common for people to retire and have kind of a honeymoon phase where they are really happy, they're playing all their golf, they're traveling, they're doing whatever fun things they wanted to do, and then about 18 months to 2 years into that, they flounder a little bit because they start to go, oh wait, no, nobody needs me for anything, or I don't have a real purpose. And that becomes depressing. It can be very socially isolating because a lot of your friends and your connections were at work. So if you don't
Yeah.
figure out how to give your life purpose
Mm.
after you retire, and whatever way that is, it doesn't have to be another job, but it can be. Um, Figuring out those social and emotional pieces of the quote retirement years are as essential, if not more essential, than figuring out your money. Your money is important, but figuring out those other pieces are what's going to make you want to get out of bed on a Wednesday morning after you retire.
Yeah, that also makes a whole lot of sense because as I can't imagine that retirement, and I see exactly what you're describing because after a while I said I get bored because I've been very active both intellectually and physically my entire life. So I go, well, that doesn't sound so great. I mean, just sitting on the beach or just sitting and watching television. I mean, it's boring. Like you say, I could see that state coming in after a certain amount of time because we're human beings who need purpose and need to get up in the morning and need to do things. Could you say, like, there are different people have different backgrounds in your field. So, what sort of expertise do you have and what do you bring to the table? What kinds of skills and expertise do you offer people so that they could get in touch with you?
Sure. So I do run a care management agency, and we do offer assistance and guidance for people, particularly adult children or family members who are trying to care for that aging loved one. So typically, our clients are people who are in midlife, who are trying to care for an older adult. The other thing that I do is a lot of speaking and teaching about ageism, ageism in the workplace, ageism in healthcare, rethinking your own retirement and your own older adult years. And that's, the reason I wrote the book. And so I'm really trying to get that message out as much as possible. And those are the things that I'm really passionate about in terms of helping people reframe how they think about all these years and to plan and prepare appropriately. And so, to that end, I think you mentioned telling people how they could find me. I do have a website. It's CorinneAuman.com. So, just my name. And then my business website is navigateseniorcare.com.
Well, I'm also curious about one of those things that for the older person, in quotes, like myself and others, I do would like to hear a little bit of what you could say about aging in the workplace, because that is really key. People that are older, and a lot of companies are very reluctant to hire somebody, but I go, well, look at the skills you bring. You're accountable, you've got experience, you're reliable, dependable. And there are a lot of times younger people don't have those skills. Those are basic skills that a lot of us just grew up with. And I'll give you an example. I worked my way through college. I was delivering newspapers all night. I'm like, well, newspapers back in the day were delivered 365 days a year. I didn't think anything of it. I worked every day. It was just that's the way things were. So, could you say something about the older person and address the companies who are reluctant sometimes to hire older people?
Yeah, so there's actually lots of good research on this now. We have these stereotypes about what older workers might be like, and typically negative stereotypes about that they might not be as healthy and they'll miss more work, or they can't learn to do new things. Those kinds of ideas. And there's some really great research out there now that shows that that's just not true. That older adult workers are more reliable. They have less absenteeism. You can learn new things and teach older adult workers new skills.
Hmm.
So we just have to kind of work to eliminate those stereotypes because they're just not true. And when older adults need accommodations in the workplace, typically those accommodations are good for all the workers, not
Hmm.
just the older adult workers. So, for example, the BMW plants in Germany
Oh,
realized that their workforce was aging and they were worried about, losing a bunch of really skilled workers all at
sure.
once. And so they changed some of their production lines. So, and they nicknamed them the pensioners lines because these were the older adults, so that any given worker wasn't doing the same repetitive motion for 8 hours a day. Instead, they
Oh,
rotated different spots on the production line so that they did a activity that used their legs for a while, and then they did an activity that used their arms, and then they did an activity that used their brain, like shifting around. And what they found was that that pensioners line that they made, instead of being less productive, was actually more productive than any of the other lines they had. And so they ended up shifting that model to all their production lines because what was good for the older workers was good for all the workers. And it helped keep everybody healthy and not injured and all those things.
yeah, it's an excellent point because it's something we know about the body, right? So a younger body is going to be strained if you're under straining in the first place, just like an older person. And it probably is more
Mhm.
interesting. So it's not repetitive. It's not the same thing every day because you've got a human being who's being treated like a machine, and we're not machines. We're actually human beings. That's an interesting point. So before we go, I do want to make sure you do get the contact information. Tell us about the book too. How do we get a hold of the book, and how do we get a hold of you?
Sure, sure. So I mentioned the websites, CorinneAuman.com or NavigateSeniorCare.com. The book is called Keenagers, Keenagers. And so it's a play on the word keen and
Got it.
keen, right? Um, and and it's available on Amazon. It's available
Okay.
on my website, and it's really for anybody who wants to look forward to growing older. You should read my book.
Yeah, sounds good. It's a very clever title. Kudos for the title. So thank you very much
Thank
for your
you.
time, your expertise. We learned a lot, and hopefully everybody else did as well. So thank you again. Appreciate you taking some time out and chatting today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
You bet. So, thank you so much for that. And hopefully, you enjoyed the episode. We've always got more things coming and more people coming. So, if you support the show, we'd really appreciate it. Subscribe, like, share, positively review, and also want to give us a shout out to the publishers, both of Burning America and On Track, Ian Hunter, for the supporting the program. So, until next time, more exciting things. Keep the episodes rocking and coming. Make sure you check in next time. Until next time, Deus Volt.